Hello, students. Today, we are going to explore something truly amazing, the human brain. You know, it's the main control center for our body. It manages absolutely everything we think, everything we feel, and everything we do. Now, in our last class, we learned about reflex actions, didn't we? Remember that example? When you touch something hot, you pull your hand away instantly. You don't even have to think about it. But what about other actions, like deciding to write something down or talking to a friend? Are all our actions this simple and automatic? Well, no. So the question is, how does our body manage these more thoughtful, complex actions? You see, for any action that needs some thinking, some planning, our body needs a powerful control system. And that system, that main coordinating center of our body, is the brain. So, what are we going to cover today? First, we'll look beyond reflexes at the nervous system. Then we'll get an overview of the human brain itself. We will talk about the thinking forebrain and the essential hindbrain. After that, we'll clarify the difference between voluntary and involuntary actions. And finally, we'll see how this important control center is protected. Okay, let's begin. To really understand the brain, we first have to understand the bigger system it belongs to, and that is the nervous system. You can think of it like the body's command and communication network, sending messages very, very quickly all over the body. Now, this nervous system has two main divisions. The first one is the central nervous system, which we often call the CNS. This is the main processing center. You can call it the headquarters. And what does it consist of? It's made of two parts, the brain and the spinal cord. Its job is to take in information and decide what to do. And the second part? That's the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. So if the CNS is the headquarters, then the PNS is like the network of telephone wires connecting the headquarters to everything else. It's all the nerves that go from the CNS to the rest of your body, carrying messages both ways, to the brain and from the brain. All right, so now let's focus on the most important part of the CNS, the brain. We'll take a closer look at its three major regions. As you can see here, the brain, our main coordinating center, is broadly divided into three major parts. We have the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. Each one has its own special jobs, so let's look at them one by one. So let's start with the first one, the forebrain. This is your center for thought and all your voluntary actions. So what exactly does the forebrain do? Well, first and most importantly, it's the main thinking part of the brain. It's where you process information. It receives sensory inputs from your sense organs, so information about hearing, smell, sight all comes here. Then, it makes sense of this information by using what's already stored in your memory. And finally, based on all this thinking, it controls all your voluntary actions. For example, deciding to move your leg muscles to walk. So, to put it very simply, the forebrain is the part of you that thinks, makes decisions, and chooses how you are going to act. It's as simple as that. Okay, but what about all the things our body does without us even thinking about them? This is where the other parts of the brain come in. These are actions beyond our thought, controlled mainly by the hindbrain. Now, inside the hindbrain, there is a very important part called the medulla. The medulla's job is to control all the involuntary actions. These are the actions that we cannot control simply by thinking. For example, think about your blood pressure, or when your mouth starts watering, that's salivation, or things like vomiting, your heartbeat, your breathing. You don't think about these things, do you? The medulla takes care of it all. Another very important part of the hindbrain is the cerebellum. Now, what does the cerebellum do? It's responsible for the precision of our voluntary actions. It also helps us maintain our posture and balance. For example, when you pick up a pencil, or when you are trying to walk in a perfectly straight line, or even riding a bicycle. All of these activities that require balance and precise movement are controlled by the cerebellum. So now that we've talked about the forebrain and the hindbrain, let's clearly compare the two types of actions they control, voluntary and involuntary. Let's see who is in control. Let's look at this comparison. On the left, we have voluntary actions. These are actions that are based on you deciding what to do next. They are controlled by your forebrain. A good example is writing something down or moving a chair. On the right, we have involuntary actions. These are actions we do not have thinking control over. These are controlled by the midbrain and the hindbrain. Examples, your heartbeat or the digestion of your food. Now, we all know the brain is extremely important, but it's also very delicate. So it makes sense that our body has a very good system to keep it safe. Let's see how our body protects this control center. Our body has two main layers of protection for the brain. Step one is the bony box. Our brain sits inside the skull, which is very hard and protects it from injury. But there's a second layer. Inside this bony box, the brain is contained in a fluid-filled balloon. This fluid acts like a shock absorber, protecting the brain from any sudden shocks or jerks. And this protection isn't just for the brain. The other part of our central nervous system, the spinal cord, is also protected. It is housed inside the vertebral column, which you might know as the backbone. So today, we've understood how animals, including us, use a nervous system for control and coordination. But this brings up a very interesting question. What about plants? They don't have a nervous system, they don't have a brain, so how do they respond to things around them? How do they know to grow towards sunlight? That is a question we will explore in our next lesson.